Hey friends, Mike Mooney here. Welcome back, and thanks so much for joining me again in another part. This is part 3 of our series on the power of mindset. And as I've been talking about during this series, I am a huge believer, have been, always will be, a huge believer in the power of mindset, the power of how we approach opportunities or challenges, and the fact that what we can do, what we can impact, what we can create truly starts from inside, truly starts from the way that we approach people and circumstances and situations. Now, this week, I want to talk about emotion and how emotion can tie to our mindset and how powerful that emotion is. You see, emotion, as we all have felt and dealt with, especially in these times, can either motivate us or they can keep us spooled up in a place that may not be healthy. They can help move us forward and drive us and keep us focused on a better place, or emotions can keep us tethered down to a place where we feel that we can't move past, we can't undo, we just can't seem to let go of. And that's the challenge with emotion, because it starts inside and then works its way out. Now, what happens when we get to a place when we can't let go of that emotion? I'll give you an example in a story from many years ago from the sport of NASCAR. And in 2001, there was a horrific accident at the end of the Daytona 500 where an icon, a legend of the sport, Dale Earnhardt Sr., was tragically killed on the final lap coming through turn 4 at Daytona. And that in itself was a tremendous loss for the sport, for its fans, but more importantly for the people that lived in the sport, those within the sport. And few took it as hard as Bill France Jr. Bill France Jr.'s father started NASCAR in 1948, so he had a very direct tie to the growth and the health and the momentum of the sport, but more importantly had personal relationships with these drivers, these men who were putting it all on the line week in and week out. And to work through this crisis, NASCAR brought in a heavyweight from Washington, D.C. named Jody Powell. And Jody was the former press secretary for Jimmy Carter. So this is a man who was no stranger to working through crisis, to handling emotion, to recognizing the role that emotion plays in making decisions and moving through situations. And Jody told me several years after the Earnhardt death that he was in a very high power meeting, senior executives with Mr. France and his team, and understandably and rightfully so, Mr. France was upset with how the sport was being positioned and painted by the media, questioning safety factors, questioning so many elements of the sport itself. Is it too fast? Is it unsafe? Should we even be racing? And those questions heightened with and tied to the loss of a dear friend and Dale Earnhardt. As Jody said, this meeting was one where it was very emotionally charged, and Mr. France was just letting it all out. As Jody put it, there were a lot of people in that room who were counting ceiling tiles, or they were looking down at their shoes. Nobody really wanted to make the direct eye contact with Mr. France. He was a very intimidating individual, if you ever had the chance to interact with him, but a very passionate man about the sport that he so dearly loved. And in the midst of him sharing his emotions with the team, we'll call it sharing, Mr. France took a breath. And at that point, Jody definitely jumped in with a very simple statement that was just so amazing. And he said, "With all due respect, Mr. France, being pissed off is not a strategy." When Jody told me that, I sat back and I couldn't believe that he jumped in and said that at that moment, but it was such an important statement. And Jody then told me, he said, at that point, Mr. France looked at him and said, "You're right. So what are we going to do about it?" And that is the beauty of both Jody's message, but also the power of emotion. You see, it's okay to feel the emotion. It's all right to be in that moment. It's all right to understand that, yes, it may hurt, it may sting, it may not be what you wanted, but the longer you sit and stay in that space of emotion, which impacts your mindset, the longer it will take you to move toward action. And that's exactly what Jody did in that moment when he said, being pissed off is not a strategy. So what are we going to do? What are we going to get after? So I would encourage you, as you're thinking about mindset, as you're thinking about the power of mindset, as you're thinking about your current state, perhaps even emotionally where you are right now with the challenges that are around us that we are facing, are you sitting in the emotion too long, or are you sitting in it long enough to recognize how you can move to action? How you take something that is internally based, an emotion, and then externally act and do something. Because when you act, you're releasing the emotion. When we sit in inertia, when we sit in places of the unknown or fear or anxiety, that emotion only ratchets up. I've rarely ever seen the emotion dissipate by sitting back and just letting things kind of happen. What can you do to act? What is one simple thing, one simple word, a task, an email, a phone call, whatever it might be? What's that one thing that you can do that can unleash and let that emotion out and move it toward action? That's what I would share with you. I would ask you to think through that. If you have other thoughts on this, I'd love to hear it. I love the interaction that I've been having during this series on the power of mindset. It seems to be really resonating with people right now, which is just fantastic. And that was my hope and my intent when I put this together. But as always, cheers to you. Cheers to the success that awaits you as we continue to evolve and grow and make an impact.